House Bill 961, a bill to amend and reenact sections 16.1, 278.9, and other sections of the Code of Virginia relating to prohibition of sale, transport, etc., of assault firearms, certain firearms magazines, silencers, and trigger activators, penalties. Reported from Public Safety with substitute, and there are floor amendments.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Levine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would move the committee amendments, please.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Madam
Delegate
Speaker.
Levine.
HB 961 is the 8th of the governor's firearm bills. It would regulate assault weapons in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Assault weapons have been used in 5 out of 6 of the mass murders over the last 40 years, either they or their extended magazines. They've been used in some of the most horrific things that we have seen as mass murders unfortunately increase year by year, month by month. Orlando, Aurora, Newtown, Tucson, these used to just be place names. Now we all know what they stand for. Extended magazines were used in Virginia Tech. Extended magazines were used in Virginia Beach. There's been a lot of misunderstanding about this bill, what it does and what it doesn't do. And I should say that a number of law-abiding gun owners have consulted with me, and I've appreciated that, the ones that have offered constructive suggestions. And we have made a lot of constructive suggestions on this legislation. There are exceptions for law enforcement, for the military. Most importantly, nobody has to give up their gun. Possession is allowed under this bill. The only thing that is disallowed is bump stocks and extended magazines. And the extended magazines, which are relatively inexpensive, it's been suggested that no one should be a felon because they keep an extended magazine. So we've even taken that consideration into account. And with that, I'd like to yield to my colleague from Fairfax, Delegate Helmer, who has a floor amendment.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Helmer.
Madam Speaker, there's a floor amendment that I've offered.
Will the clerk report the floor amendment?
Floor amendment to House Bill 961, offered by Delegate Helmer. Line 465, substitute after purchase, strike possess. Amendment 2, line 466, substitute after this, strike section, insert subsection. Amendment 3, line 467, substitute after C, insert, it is unlawful for any person to possess any large capacity firearm magazine. A violation of this subsection is punishable as a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Madam Speaker,
Delegate Helmer.
speaking to the amendment, this right here is a picture of a 30-round magazine. It's familiar to everyone in this room who has served in the military. Soldiers carry this magazine in order to have the maximum practicable number of rounds available to engage the enemy. It has been carried by soldiers in combat since the adoption of the M16 during Vietnam. But our fellow Virginians aren't our enemies. Neither the requirements of self-defense, nor sporting, nor hunting require a high-capacity magazine. This amendment makes it a misdemeanor to possess a magazine whose purpose is to enable mass murder when turned on civilians. I have heard from critics that no Virginian should be made a felon for goods lawfully purchased. This amendment makes it a misdemeanor to possess this magazine, a tool of mass violence. It makes no Virginian a felon for a good lawfully purchased while ensuring every Virginian is safer from the types of mass murder inflicted on our fellow citizens at Virginia Tech, at Parkland, at Sandy Hook, and at far too many peaceful places throughout our country. I hope it will be the will of the body to adopt this amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Will the clerk report the floor amendment? Oh, yeah. Yes, Delegate from Culpeper.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate
Freitas.
resume the floor for a question?
Will the delegate yield to a question from Delegate Freitas?
The delegate will yield.
The delegate will yield. Delegate Freitas, you have the floor.
So as I look at this, I guess my initial question is I'm glad it's gone from a felony to a misdemeanor, but my understanding is that you can still go to jail for the sort of misdemeanor that we have on that. Is that correct?
Delegate Helmer.
Madam Speaker, I will say that there is nothing in this bill that changes the penalties of a misdemeanor.
Delegate Freitas.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate yield for another question?
Will the delegate yield?
Madam Speaker, I will yield.
The delegate will yield. Delegate Freitas.
So my understanding is that you can go to jail for up to a year under this if we were to pass this. And so if I understand this correctly, if I have not just a 30-round magazine, but unless something changed, it's also any magazine over 12 rounds. Is that also correct?
Madam
Delegate
Speaker, I
Helmer.
would answer the delegate that the bill makes quite clear that possession of a high-capacity magazine is a misdemeanor, and that it gives a good provision in time to turn in a high-capacity magazine like those used in many mass murders.
Madam
Delegate
Speaker, will the
Freitas.
delegate yield for another question?
Will the delegate yield?
I will yield for one more question, Madam Speaker.
The delegate will yield for one more. Delegate Freitas.
So thank you, Madam Speaker. I understand that we're referring to something as a high-capacity magazine, and we're just simply stating what that is. And we're saying anything over 12 rounds. So most magazines that are used commonly for pistols are 15-round magazines. And my understanding is that on December 31st of 2020, if I had 5 15-round magazines, which generally come standard with my pistol, on January 1, 2021, I would be guilty of 5 Class 1 misdemeanors that could carry a sentence of well over a year in jail. Is that correct, Madam Speaker?
Delegate Helmer.
Madam Speaker, I feel that I've answered the delegate's question about whether it would be a Class 1 misdemeanor to possess a magazine in excess of that allowed in this law already. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate yield for another question?
Will the delegate yield?
Madam Speaker, I've yielded for 3 questions and made it quite clear. Thank you.
The delegate declines. Delegate Freitas, would you like
Madam
to speak?
Speaker, don't blame him. Speaking to the bill.
Would you like to speak to the floor amendments before
Floor
we vote on
amendment.
the floor
Thank you, Madam
amendment?
Speaker.
Delegate Freitas, you have the floor.
So again, as I look at this doesn't just cover the magazines. From what I understand, we're also changing the definition with respect to what an assault weapon is. And now we're stating that if something has a forward grip, that's now classified as an assault weapon. And again, I apparently can't ask any more questions, so I'll just have to assume that that's currently still the law. And unless Delegate Levine would like to yield for a question.
Delegate Freitas, you're standing,
Okay.
you're speaking to the bill right now.
So what this comes down to is that if you have a forward grip on something, we're now saying that makes a weapon assaulty. I'm not exactly sure what makes a forward grip something from a rifle into an assault rifle, especially when you consider that there's incredibly practical reasons why somebody potentially with a disability might need a forward grip in order to be able to better control the firearm that they're actually shooting. But again, this comes down to the same problem that we've had with a number of things, and that is if something looks scary or if I don't perfectly understand it, then therefore I can just designate it as an assault weapon or designate it as a high-capacity magazine, and now it makes it something that I can potentially put you in jail over. The other problem that we have with this, Madam Speaker, is that we go on and we look at various court decisions going forward. These are clearly both firearms and accessories in common use throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm not sure if we're going to find out exactly how many people would be adversely affected by this and what that would actually mean in court when you look at decisions with respect to Heller, McDonald, Duncan, Fayok. There's any number of different court decisions we have either that have already been decided or pending, which suggests that what we're about to do here today is entirely unconstitutional. So, Madam Speaker, I would just encourage that we not adopt the underlying legislation. The floor amendments, I can appreciate, make this bill less worse, but ultimately, Madam Speaker, it is still a bad bill. Thank you.
Shall the floor amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The floor amendments are agreed to. Delegate from Campbell, Delegate Ferris. Speaking to the bill.
I have a question on the bill itself.
Delegate Ferris.
Will the
Speaking to the
delegate
bill.
yield? Delegate Levine.
Delegate Levine will yield. Delegate Ferris, you have the floor.
I will yield.
Madam Speaker, I would ask the gentleman, is he aware of D.C. versus Heller, the Supreme Court decision?
Delegate Levine.
I would answer the delegate, I'm well aware of that decision, as I'm aware of the Colby decision, which held that these assault weapons are weapons of war. This is the Fourth Circuit, which oversees Virginia, and that decision had cert denied by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Delegate Ferris, do you have
Madam
another
Speaker,
question?
one more question, please.
Follow-up question. Will the delegate yield?
I will yield.
The delegate will yield. Delegate Ferris, you have the floor.
I would just ask the patron, would he feel like that the Attorney General would be required to defend this bill if it was to go through the court systems?
Delegate Levine.
Madam Speaker, I would answer the delegate that any constitutional law should be defended by the Attorney General, and every single appellate court in the United States has found that these bans, including far more restrictive bans in our neighboring states like Maryland, are constitutional.
Delegate Ferris.
I think that's enough, Madam
Thank you.
Speaker. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate yield for a question?
Will the
I will
delegate
yield.
yield? The delegate will yield.
So does the delegate have any indication of how many people could potentially be affected, how many Virginians could potentially be affected if this law goes into effect?
Madam Speaker, I would answer that no law-abiding Virginian would be affected.
Delegate Freitas.
Madam Speaker, so what the delegate is...
Delegate
so
Freitas, do
will
you
the
have another
delegate yield
question?
for another
Will the
question?
delegate yield?
I will yield.
The delegate will yield.
So, Madam Speaker, if I heard the delegate correctly, he's saying that no law-abiding citizen would be affected by this whatsoever. So no currently law-abiding citizen would have to turn in anything under this bill, or does he want to reevaluate that statement?
Delegate Levine.
I would answer the delegate that Virginians understand that laws change, and law-abiding Virginians follow the law.
Delegate Freitas.
Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate
Actually, I'm
Freitas.
sorry, Madam Speaker, one more question if the delegate will yield.
Will the delegate yield?
I will yield.
The delegate yields. Delegate Freitas, one more question.
I also noticed that what we're currently doing within this bill is we're going to confiscate legally acquired property, or we're going to demand that it be turned in. Is there any sort of compensation that is offered to citizens as we take their property, or is this a taking with no compensation?
Delegate Levine.
Madam Speaker, I would encourage the delegate to read the bill. There is no confiscation.
Thank you. Delegate Freitas.
Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate Freitas.
I see. So there's no confiscation, but if I don't turn it in, then I'm guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is with respect to that from a legal perspective. So if the fact that you're not coming to my house to kick in my door and take my legally acquired property away from me is something I greatly accept and appreciate, but ultimately you're still going to make me guilty of a misdemeanor, potentially multiple misdemeanors for owning something that, again, was legal the day before. And I would just remind the delegate that just because you make something legal doesn't mean you make it just. And I would have thought the civil rights movement would have taught us all that, Madam Speaker.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Levine.
Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate Levine, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, to me, the number of lives lost, the parents who've come to me who hate these drills where their 7-year-olds have to hide under desks. People, I've had a constituent, an 8-year-old girl tell me she's afraid to go to the theater after Aurora. Weapons have their proper place. Guns are properly used for hunting and for self-defense and for target shooting. This bill doesn't affect legitimate uses of gun owners. It doesn't take away their guns. It allows law enforcement to have weapons in the military. It allows transfers even when you're sports shooting. This bill takes into account all the concerns that people have raised by gun owners. If it takes you 2 seconds to change a magazine, that's 2 seconds of your life. Frankly, it'll probably take you longer to load the extended magazine than you'd lose. But for the people affected by gun violence, those 2 seconds save lives. Gabby Giffords would be dead today if some brave woman in her 50s had not jostled the arm of the killer as he changed those magazines. More people at a Waffle House in Nashville, Tennessee would be dead today if it were not for the need to change the magazines. Now, if you're not trying to kill people, changing a magazine is no big deal. But if you are, it's a moment of weakness. And it's one that good citizens trying to prevent mass murder can take advantage of. I suggest to you that whatever burdens there are to gun owners are tiny compared to the loss of a child for a parent. And I urge everyone to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to correct something once again, and I'm not going to be distracted by this because right now we are talking about assault weapons. But speaking to the bill, Madam Speaker,
Delegate McQuinn.
I just want to pull up just for a moment to help us better understand as we look at this period in the history of the civil rights. The civil rights was, Madam Speaker, and only because it was brought up on the floor, was a period in a long struggle that African Americans had to go through during a period of segregation, disenfranchisement, marginalized, and so many other things. That was a very painful period. And so as we talk about assault weapons, where many have had to feel the pain in various communities because of individuals who think they have a need to have one, I just want to be clear that we are talking about two different things here. I think that as we move forward with this House Bill 961, that is an important step forward to save lives. And I think, would hope that all of us will look at it as being a tool to help, again, once again, to move forward, to save lives, and to create a paradigm shift in this Commonwealth that would benefit all of us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez.
Madam Speaker, I have a motion.
Delegate Lopez to the floor.
Move the pending question, Madam Speaker.
All those in favor of the pending question shall say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The pending question is called for. Shall the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The bill is engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
House Bill 962, a bill